Shooters ready. Stand by. All right, holster up. Last shot at 4:03.
Freaking in sync.
All right, come on over. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. It's Neil and Natalie and Chris. Today we are going to talk about the first phase of the FBI qualification. The draw and fire 3 with one hand, switch to the other hand and shoot 3 more.
MagTech is the only Freedom seed I use on the range. I personally have over 100,000 rounds downrange of MagTech, and it's unbelievably reliable, very accurate, and a great value. Pick some up for your next range trip wherever you shop for range supplies.
Okay, so you guys just shot it. What are the challenges that you see in that?
So I think what people run into, especially on this stage, they don't shoot a lot of single-handed stuff and they don't really practice shifting the gun between their hands.
Yep.
So even though 6 seconds is quite a bit of time, I think we both ran it in like 4.
Yep.
People get worried about it, so it causes shanks, things like that. But it's not that bad if you just worry about the fundamentals of what you're doing versus time.
Yep. Natalie, how about you? What did you get there out of that?
You know, I kind of like what Chris was saying. I think that people don't really know what they need to practice for one-handed shooting. And so, you know, with me, I've been to enough classes that I kind of know the different bits and pieces of the puzzle to put it together. But man, it's interesting doing it. It's interesting seeing the actual feedback on the paper.
Okay, so I'll show you the target in a minute. They both got all of their hits in on that first run. And you know, and it's a hot day here in Kansas. We're getting ready to teach a class in Kansas this week, so we're together making some content. But let's dive into some of the challenges. And one of the big challenges, I think, for most folks, the offhanded shooting or the single-handed shooting is a challenge for everybody because we don't do it enough. We don't see it a lot, but we see it more than we probably should in self-defense scenarios, because we always say, man, I'd sure like to see them get 2 hands on the gun. But in some cases you can. If you're carrying a child or if you're carrying whatever and you don't want to drop the baby, you know, there's reasons to shoot one-handed and there's reasons we practice that. But for me, one of the bigger challenges is that actual transition over. And that's, you know, I've never seen a gunfight where somebody shot one-handed with the right hand and then switched over to left. I've never seen that. I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I'm saying I haven't seen it. But that's one of the artificialities of this is can you do that? And you know, and you're switching hands, you have to realign your sights and all that. But for me, it's not so much the sights and the switching hands, it's the letting go and grabbing back, especially if you have an aggressive grip like a jerkman or, you know, some really aggressive grips. I struggle with that sometimes to see that dot the second time. However, I think 6 seconds is pretty generous for this. And so if you don't worry about the time and just see your sights, life is good. But Chris, talk to us a little bit about you know, that transition. What should people be thinking about?
So I kind of think about like shaking hands. So when you go up and you're getting ready to shake somebody's hand, you open your hand, but you still have some tension in the thumb and the drumstick kind of area. And that's kind of what I do. I'm still kind of holding the gun and just sweep and switch, shaking hands. And I almost, when I was learning how to do this well, I would almost say that to myself, like shake hands, shake hands. And once you do that and you get kind of comfortable with it, the key is understanding you have to release the trigger. That's the key. Release the trigger and then just get the other hand on and then get into the trigger once you're ready, not too early because you'll dirt shot. And go ahead.
I was going to say that's another good one. Part of that switching is if you come in and put your finger right on the trigger, the chances you're going to have
before you get out there.
So you've got to keep that finger high and back at register, and then as you have got your grip, then move to the trigger and start your work. So, you know, I think a fair switch off is what, 1.5 seconds? Is you know, which isn't a ton of time, but it's not a short time either. You know, it's not fast to do that. But you know, if I'm really trying to run this, if I'm trying to do this in like 3 seconds, that's one of the challenges I found with myself is I get to that trigger a little too quick, or I come right to the trigger, and that's bad. And for you guys at home, and the whole idea of us doing this is so that you can go practice this because we're going to have our little FBI challenge open for a while. Go practice it a little bit. Get good at it before you put all of this together. So, Natalie, what kind of challenges physically do you feel like you have struggled with? And step forward here. I hate it when you stand behind me on camera.
You can't see both of you though.
I know.
Well, the main challenge that I was kind of working with was the dot.
Yep.
When I shoot one-handed, I tend to have a really hard line of tension in my arm, and that does kind of bring the gun down just a little bit. So a lot of my hits are under the A, in the A zone still, but under the A. And so I was having a little bit of trouble being able to find my dot and trusting that the dot is there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think, to take this back, we've got a whole series of videos of dry fire doing this. If you don't come practice it live, that's something you're not going to catch on to.
Right.
And so, I've heard Chris talk about, aiming at the top third of that A when you're one-handed, especially at 3 yards. How much do you think you really need to use the dot at 3 yards?
Yeah.
So for me, I want to be careful how I say this.
Be careful.
So I use aiming references, but not necessarily the dot. So when I'm shooting at 3, especially one-handed, and I'm under time pressure, I'll use the optic housing, or with irons, I'll just use the frame of the rear sight. Because at 3, the probability of you being extremely muzzle low or extremely muzzle high with practice is low.
Yeah.
Windage is going to be your issue more often than not elevation.
Yep.
So I'll just frame the alpha zone or whatever I'm shooting at with my optic housing and let it go.
Yeah.
Because what I found at 3 yards, the optic itself takes up about 4 inches or so at 3 yards of an alpha zone. An iron is about 5.
Yeah.
And if you're lined up with the target, it's probably gonna go where it needs to go. Now, to prove that, when we look at the targets, on my target, everything's slightly low because I was framed at the top of the alpha.
Yep.
But are they workable hits? And the targets we're using are less forgiving than the QIT targets that you would run FBI. But I'm not saying do one or the other. I'm saying experiment with it and just know what you can or cannot trust. That's kind of what I'm advocating.
When we ran the FBI challenge the first time all those years ago, we did all the dry fire, and the first time most of these folks that took the challenge that were part of the test group, the first time they shot it live was on camera, and they all passed. One of them had to do it twice, but at the FBI, they get 2 chances too. So 11 out of 11 passed with just the dry fire. But I think adding this, go to the range and get a little time. Now you have to have a range that lets you draw, and if you don't, then knock some time off, knock 2 seconds off of that time or something along those lines. So you may have to, your mileage may vary based on your location and what your range allows. We're lucky that we're at a range that lets us do all of the stuff that we kind of really want to do. But if you don't practice that, you don't catch on to the, well, I'm a little below the A, I'm a little above the A. What can I use for a frame of, point of reference? And it's not necessarily point shooting. I think everybody's going to say it's point shooting.
It's not.
It's not. It's absolutely not point shooting. It's just using a little bit different reference in the dot. When I shoot it, I'm using that reference and then confirming my dot, because there's plenty of time. 6 seconds is forever. Right. And so there is no rush in all this.
Well, that's the other thing. When her and I are running it, we're competitive, right? We want to shoot. We want to shoot fast. We want to do well on camera.
Yeah.
So we left 2 seconds on the table.
Yeah.
So theoretically, that 2 seconds, and I think both of us were probably in about the 30 split with probably a 1.5 draw.
Yep.
So if you went to 0.5 splits or even 0.6 splits and a 1.8 draw, you'd still be within time. The key is shoot to your ability. Like if you spray and pray this, you're probably going to get a couple misses.
Yep.
And that's what, in my experience, where I've seen issues on the FBI qual are stage 1 or the last stage at 25.
That's the worst. That's where the challenge. That's where the shots get thrown.
Yeah.
Typically.
And if you have an issue on stage 1, now you're carrying that through the rest of the qualification. So you're better off to kind of just breathe and let it happen. There's plenty of time to do it. Plenty.
Yeah, I think there is, and so let's do this. Let's shoot it again. I'm going to move the camera around so everybody can kind of see you from back. Watch the draws. We'll shoot it one more time, and then we'll give you guys some homework. So when you go to the range, you can have some ideas of the things to work on.
Yeah.
Sound good?
And then when you bring the camera around, we'll explain like the differences between the targets.
So let's start with Chris's target. So Chris is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know if those are the actual shots counted, but all 6 of them in the A zone right there.
But you'll notice when I was talking about framing, I'm framing my optic here, and at 3, that's, and I don't need hard dot focus.
Yep, so you got your offset. And then we go over to Natalie's, and you got the same thing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all 6 of them in the A zone. Now, are you seeing your dot the entire time, Nat?
For this one, I'm seeing it kind of pop in and out, you know, let me show you. For these shots, I definitely saw the dot. For this one, not as much.
Okay.
I was more trusting that my trigger pull, that I was going deliberate enough that I knew where the shot was gonna go.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of speaks to what you were saying about not point shooting.
Right, yeah, not point shooting. You have a reference.
Yes.
It's just a matter of how detailed a reference do you need?
Yes, yeah, you should have a detailed enough reference to know
that
where
you can
your
make your
shot is going to
hit.
go based on what you're doing.
And then kind of what we're playing with these targets is we're using the alpha Charlie area, which this is significantly less forgiving than what you would see on a Q target. A Q target's going to go out and be a little bit wider and a little bit farther. So this is actually less, especially in the alpha. If you're doing this and you're actually running the qual on the right target, the FBI QIT99, I believe, anywhere in this area is an acceptable hit. So that's the thing to think about as well. One of the biggest pitfalls I see with shooters is they'll try and aim for the head or present to the head, which has a lot less forgiving from a windage perspective. So if you're not really tuned into single-handed shooting, normally it's not an elevation issue, it's going to be a windage issue because that gun's moving around under your trigger press. So just something to think about. Aim for the center.
All right, let's shoot her again. I'm going to have the camera behind so you can... All right, eyes and ears. Ooh. All right, shooters, are you ready?
Yup.
Yep.
Stand by.
Again, like clockwork.
You guys did that faster yet. Natalie's racing with Chris. All hits are in again, so life is pretty good here. All right, so let's talk homework for a trip to the range to work on this. First, you got to have a range that's going to allow you to do all of this. Most of them are going to let you, stand in the box, and you can probably switch hands.
Yeah, even if you were going from ready, at least from what I'm seeing today on time, our draws are about 1.5.
Yeah.
From 3, so that's we're taking care. But if you did it from ready, I'd give myself a 0.6, 0.7 to go from ready.
Yeah.
And you could still make it work.
Yeah. So adjust your time a little bit accordingly for your location. If you can't draw, if you can draw, use the 6 seconds. You'll need a par timer. You'll need all of that. But I think the big thing is if you followed along and you did the dry work that we talked about a few weeks ago, refresh yourself with that a little bit before you go live, and then go live and shoot a couple of mags at this distance with the 3 and 3 just to get a feel for it. And then, I think that's your good homework. That's your work for the day. You've got something that now can be myelinated in your brain that you can come back to later when it's time to put everything together. Guys, this is just stage 1. There's several more stages. We're going to do this exact same thing, and we're going to have homework for a few weeks for you guys to work on. And then the challenge opens up where you get to go shoot it on video yourself. Post that in our dry fire group on Facebook.
For prizes.
And for prizes, because we got some stuff coming on. And I've already had some folks email me, and there's been comments, how long is it going to be open? What are the prizes? All of that stuff. We're working all of that out. I've got some prizes from some of our sponsors that are going to be some cool stuff. And the thing's going to be probably, once we're done, we're probably going to give everybody a month at least to get your stuff done. So there won't be a hurry. As long as you're watching the channel, you're not going to miss it. So thanks for watching. Nice shooting today, you guys. Well done. Holy smokes. Glad I didn't have to shoot this. See you next time.